My name is Lindsay Moore, and today I'm going to be talking about totalitarianism, authoritarianism, megalomania, and hegemony. We're going to start with totalitarianism. I have a definition here I want to read. A government that seeks to subordinate the individual to take the state to the state by controlling not only the political and economic matters, but also the attitudes, values, beliefs of its population. Autocracy. Totalitarianism and authoritarianism, which I'm going to get to in another few slides, are both considered autocracies. They are just simply governments in which one person possesses unlimited power. So what is totalitarianism? We have a definition there, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Totalitarian governments are the most tyrannical and controlling of all the different forms of government seen throughout the world and throughout history. As I've already mentioned, their government power is concentrated with one individual or small group of individuals. Totalitarian governments seek to control all aspects of their citizens' lives. The means of productions are all controlled by the state. What foods, crops, resources, services will be produced or offered, or how they'll be distributed, are all strictly controlled. Even the behavior, religious beliefs, values of the citizens are monitored, policed, and punished, and usually very severely, especially if they're anything outside the views of the establishment. In these types of societies, there's no such thing as free speech or expression in any form. The media is strictly controlled and really is no more than a propaganda machine. And propaganda plays a significant role in the initial success of a totalitarian regime, and it remains a staple of its growth and survival. A really good example is George Orwell's novel 1984. It really perfectly describes what life in a totalitarian society would be like. Your every move, your every conversation is monitored, and the threat of a neighbor or friend turning you in for something is high and is always looming. Citizens of these kinds of governments are severely punished when they act outside or speak outside of what the government believes. And they're usually jailed, murdered, sent to labor camps and things of that sort. This next slide, I have a video that really kind of nails down how these kinds of governments operate.
Dictatorships have had an incredible impact in the past century.
These dictators ended up learning from one another.
They're all different, but many use the same tactics.
The use of terror,
propaganda,
control the elite, create an enemy, cult of personality,
use violence. These are tools that dictators use to stay in power.
Yeah, I think that little tiny clip from a larger series of videos really sums up how these dictatorships work and how they play. Here in this slide, I just wanted to list some really notable totalitarian governments. Most people are familiar with these infamous examples. There could be a lot more listed here, and all were just as evil as the next. But these are pretty defining examples, and I know a lot of people are familiar with them. Each of these regimes were ruled by vicious leaders that committed the most heinous atrocities against their citizens and even the surrounding countries. These dictators came into power usually in a cult of personality. I just want to explain that briefly. Now, I have some, I did take this from Wikipedia, the cult of personality definition, but I think it describes it perfectly. It's when arises when a country's regime, or more rarely individual, uses techniques of mass media, propaganda, the big lie, spectacle, the arts, patriotism, the government, organized demonstrations, and rallies to create an idealized, heroic, and worshipful image of a leader, often through the unquestioning flattery and praise. And it is often seen in totalitarian and authoritarian countries. This pretty much sums up these leaders. They are very often portray themselves as godlike. They they usually pitch a utopian society that will ensure that everyone is equal, that those at the top, the wealthy upper class, would no longer be able to live off the suffering and hardship of workers. They focus a lot on equality. And their rhetoric is very persuasive, especially to the masses who are usually looking for a change in their government. It is very appealing and hard to see how some of these ideas could possibly bring anything but improvement. I mean, you're hearing all these things about how we're all just going to work together and everyone's going to have everything that they need. It's hard to see past that sometimes. There was some opposition, a lot of opposition in some cases, but the momentum of the citizens that believed was stronger, and the fear of the mob brought even non-believers into the fold. They were fearful. They were afraid to even say anything. They kind of started just going along with what was happening. In almost every case, religion was banned. Free speech and expression were banned and restricted. Through the terror and policies and programs of these governments, they were guilty of killing millions upon millions of people through genocide, complete economic breakdown, famine, and mass execution of the opposition. Really terrible stuff. And this is the effect of totalitarianism. I mean, I found this little quote that Stalin, Hitler, and Mao are statistically the most effective mass murderers of the 20th century. The numbers vary, but it is estimated that Stalin killed 40 million people, Mao killed 60 million, and Hitler killed 30 million. One of the more interesting things was learning about Mao's Great Leap Forward, which was meant to make a communes that would create crops for food that would help feed the people that they needed to industrialize China. It ended up being a complete disaster, and they estimate some 54 million people died in the famine that resulted from that policy. So we're going to move on to authoritarianism. I spent a good time talking about totalitarianism, and that's because it's the most extreme example of an autocratic system of government, and it basically sets the stage for the explanation of authoritarianism. They're essentially the same. They're still usually ruled by one individual or a small group. That's the thing that they share. The differences are small, but there are differences. In authoritarianism government, there is some limited political freedom. There are still strict government controls that are imposed on political institutions and groups like the legislature, political parties, and interest groups. The regime justifies itself as a necessary evil, uniquely capable of coping with societal problems such as hunger, poverty, and violence. Strict government impose constraints on social freedoms such as suppression of political opponents and anti-regime activity. And the presence of a ruling executive with vague, shifting, and loosely defined powers. They pretty much make up their own rules as they go. Here I have some examples. I try to pull some examples of authoritarian governments. This is current rankings from the Heritage Foundation. They use these matrix to rank governments of different countries around the world, 186 I believe. Here in this repressed category, I found that these tend to be more totalitarian type of governments. North Korea for sure, Venezuela, even Cuba. Over here on the left though, the mostly free category, I would probably say that these are more authoritarian. There's a little bit more political freedom. China certainly went from a completely totalitarian type of government to authoritarian. And the next thing I'm going to move on to is this little video that just talked about the Heritage Index and how and why they do what they do.
Every day, men and women around the globe go to work, each with the same goal, to prosper. But what's not the same is the degree of economic freedom each country offers to its people. Every year, the Heritage Foundation ranks almost every country by its economic freedom, and the results are pretty interesting. The index uses data from sectors like business, trade, governance, and policy to generate a score, with 100 being the most free. Countries that score high are those that have a business-friendly tax code and governments that encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. In addition to enjoying higher levels of financial prosperity, people in these free societies live longer, have better health, are more educated, and surprisingly, are better protectors of the environment. So why does all this matter? It turns out that while there is no single solution to the world's major challenges, economic freedom can have a powerful effect on improving society. Our data shows that the 5 freest economies in each region are significantly more prosperous than the 5 least free. Every year's index confirms this point, showing that countries that score higher on the index also perform higher in 3 key areas: income per capita, social progress, and democratic governance. Economic freedom is not just about data and rankings. It's about empowering people to choose their path in life. And while the principles of economic freedom serve as a sure guide, they are nonetheless only a guide. What truly will matter in the years to come are the creative solutions to pressing world problems that are certain to flow from people who are truly free to choose. Go to heritage.org/index to dive deeper into this year's findings.
I think that that's a really good representation, and I think they do a really good job in understanding what makes countries really truly free. This is just a snapshot of the current rankings. I thought it was an interesting map to point out. Going to this link, they have some really good information about the rankings and how they come up with the rankings, and some of it was kind of surprising. It's worth checking out. The next topic I'm going to talk about is megalomania. Now I have a definition here. I also took this from Wikipedia. It was often referred to when I was looking into it as narcissistic personality disorder. And this is a disorder characterized by a long-term pattern of exaggerated feelings, self-importance, and excessive need for admiration, and a lack of empathy toward other people. People with NDP often spend much time thinking about achieving power and success, or on their appearance. Typically, they also take advantage of the people around them, such narcissistic behavior typically begins by early adulthood and occurs across the broad range of situations. Now, how does this relate to totalitarianism and authoritarianism? Well, I think we can all agree that the regimes that were listed, especially in the first under the totalitarian regimes, the leaders were obviously megalomaniacs. They clearly had feelings of superior worth, of great importance, godlike. I spoke about godlike before. There's no doubt that they created the admiration of the people that they tormented, and power and success were at the core of everything that they did. In almost every case, when I looked up some of these dictators with images of them, they were highly decorated. They were very ornate when they were seen in public. Not in all cases, but in many cases. They're also infamous for manipulating the people around them, including families and friends or very close advisors. I think in recent memory, there was a news story about Kim Jong-il murdering his cousin and some close advisors and family simply because he thought that they may be working against him. And clearly that shows a lack of empathy. And there's certainly a lack of empathy when you allow millions of your people, your citizens, to starve to death or just kill them off in the masses because you believe they may be working against you. As they see it, the death and suffering of the people around them is the necessity of the greater good. It's clearly a it's clearly a psychological disorder that played a role in all of these totalitarian and authoritarian regimes throughout history. I doubt any country with this type of role had a dictator that was not to some degree a megalomaniac. the characteristics of this disorder literally shaped the policies and tragedies that played out. I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is homogeny. I came to know homogeny through a political science class, and to me it was this first definition: political, economic, or military predominance or control over one state over others. But came to discover that there is also a philosophical theory of cultural homogeny, and this refers to the domination or rule of one group over others through the use of ideological manipulation or through the creation and manipulation of ideas, beliefs, and values that people hold. The idea of cultural homogeny comes from Antonio Gramsci. Yeah, sorry. He detailed his theories in what became known as the prison notebooks, and they were written while he was in prison by an Italian fascist regime. He essentially believed that a powerful group of elites controlled the rest of society by controlling, manipulating, normalizing thoughts, values, and beliefs. This is done through media, education, and so on. He basically says that if you control the beliefs, you control the people. And I think we can all see how that makes a lot of sense. In the video that I linked here, Understanding Cultural Homogeny, they make some really interesting points. They talk about how we do things in our everyday life that we don't even understand why we do them. We do them simply because they have become the norm. They've been suggested to us as being the norm, and we just do them. We don't even think about them. You know, one of the examples was growing grass in your front yard. Why do we grow grass in our front yard? It's what's been acceptable and what's expected. And so that's what we do. It's an interesting video if you have the time to watch it. I also included a video here, The Power of Suggestion, which was brought to my mind. It was a video I watched on Netflix, an episode, and it was disturbing to me how easily we can have suggestions made to us in a way that we don't even notice, and it influences what we do. It's very interesting if you have some time to watch it. It's a fairly short video, about 6 minutes. So I just wanted to conclude here. This graphic kind of sums up my thinking about this. After talking about totalitarianism and authoritarianism, megalomania and hegemony, they all fit together. They really create the perfect storm that leads to the ruin of a country and its citizens. You know, it's not uncommon for people to ask, especially when you're speaking about like well-known regimes like Hitler's Germany, you know, how could people let this happen? And sometimes you'll hear people say, it'll never happen here. And the one thing that should be taken away from learning about these types of governments and the type of people that create them, the megalomaniacs, and the system used to create and manage the tyrannical governments, the hegemony, is that we should all be on guard. It happens right in front of your eyes, and more easily than most people believe. We see how mass media is used today. Rather than reporting facts, information is twisted to fit a narrative. And make no mistake, this is a form of propaganda and manipulation. You can see it happen even more brazenly on social media. Information is constantly posted as fact, and there's no basis in fact at all. People simply just believe it. This happened to me recently. We had a dinner party, and we had some people over, and they were telling me this story about a company that was doing something horrible, and I just thought, God, that's almost unbelievable. So I had to go, and I went and looked it up, and come to find out it was a Facebook post that went viral, and people are just telling this story as if it's fact, with taking no time to find out if it's fact or not. And you know, this is really dangerous when people don't take the time to verify information and develop their own opinions based on facts. They start believing anything, and it's even more dangerous when people begin to fear speaking out against untruth and lies. And this is how a small group of people can take take over a country. And I'm going to end on just a quote that stuck with me as I was doing research for this project. It's from Hannah Arendt. She was author of a book titled The Origins of Totalitarianism. And she was a brilliant political theorist, and she experienced briefly before escaping Hitler's Nazi Germany. And the quote is, "The possibility that gigantic lies and monstrous falsehoods can eventually be established as unquestioned facts, that man may be free to change his own past at will, and that the difference between truth and falsehood may cease to be objective and become a mere matter of power and cleverness, of pressure and infinite reputation." I think that pretty much sums it up. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks for listening.